this week?
Well, first of all, it's been a busy week in all over the country, primarily in Baltimore. Baltimore appears to be well on its way to becoming the next Detroit with their kind of rioting going on, and it has been a cluster up there, I think.
You know, it's a hard situation for the police to be there, and I've been there. I've been involved in the so-called riots that we've had in Lexington back when Tony Sullivan was shot and killed years ago. You remember that? Police-involved shooting. And we've had a couple pop up here and there. And it's a hard one because at any given time you're lucky to have scrape up 50 officers to take on a crowd of up to 1,000 to 1,500 people in a town like this. And there's a whole lot of bluffing going on. You have to stand your ground, but at the same time you got to be able to move people. And I tell you, that's the time that the police need the most support, because when you're on that line and there's 50 of you and there are hundreds or thousands of them, you need to know that the community's backing you up for doing what you have to do. But you're still policing citizens, so you want to make sure that you use as little force as possible. But it's a hard spot to be in, and you're terrified too on that one. I'll tell you, it's scary to be there and have that stuff thrown at you. Not know if someone in the crowd's going to pull a gun and start shooting, and what are you going to do if they do? Because how do you return fire? Those police are very brave for being in the middle of that. They are.
Well, it's interesting to watch, very frustrating. I know Mark Barner, the new police chief, has, when the interview process was going on, Ferguson, Missouri issue was on the front burner, and all of the candidates that were interviewed were asked about how would you handle the Ferguson situation differently. And all of them talked about the police department's relationship with the community. And I know I can remember Mark saying it appears that the police department had no relationship with the general population in Ferguson. Now, that may be wrong, but he said that that's what the appearance is. So we're going to watch this, but I just, the people that I'm so sorry for are the merchants in this part of Baltimore who are having their businesses broken into, burned, and looted. And I saw one report that somebody watched their business burn down and said, we got no insurance because we can't get insurance. And the CVS finally moved into this part of Baltimore, and guess what? They get burned out. So, well, that's the self-destructive part of it. You're destroying things in a neighborhood in which you got to live.
But you talk about police departments and relationships with the community. We do have a very good relationship in this community. Our police department does with all aspects of the community because they focused on that. But I also know that a police department has to have that relationship, but it also has to have the willingness and ability and training to respond to this stuff when it happens. And for the way that we always handled it when I was a police officer is we would put our officers in their nice crisp uniforms on the front line, and you would try your best to talk people down, but you had the force backing you up behind the scenes when things got nasty that could come in hand to take care of business. And that's what you want to do first. You want to try to make these things work with as little force as possible. Baston, and now I'm sure that Mark Barner is doing the same thing. I mean, a lot of training is involved with that. And it's a credit to our agency and our community that they're able to respond to that. But you have to stay on top of it, because things change.
Do you remember the DARE program?
I do.
Tell me what the DARE program.
Well, my recollection of the DARE program is an officer was assigned to be a liaison and go to schools and hold classes and teach children about drugs, but it was also an opportunity for an officer to have a contact with the kids at a very young age and see the positive aspect of a police officer and not just what's perceived as a negative aspect of it. It was a community relations thing. It was reaching out to the community and trying to get these kids before they were brainwashed on the street.
One of the things that, yes, it was in 1986 when you were just
Out of high school.
barely.
Mm-hmm.
I read an article about this program out in Los Angeles, California called the DARE program. And I thought we needed to have some kind of a program for the police to talk about drugs and laws and that sort of thing. And so I squirreled enough money away to send Greg Howard, who was a patrol officer at the time, and Jim Camara, who was an administrator for the school system, out to Los Angeles for a 2-week training program. They came back and we went to the school board and asked the school board to let us do a pilot program with this DARE program. And they reluctantly said okay. And so we were in 5 elementary schools, and they would go, and it's called Drug Resistance Education, DARE. And so Greg Howard and Jim Camara were the people responsible for doing it. And it was such a hit. And schools said, how come we can't have that? How come we can't have that? And so it got into all of time. It was just that it intersected. And so they basically got out of the DARE business. And I said to folks, I said, it's not about drug education, really. You said it's about community relations. Now here's how here's how it worked. I said most everybody that has a contact with police officers is they get a ticket. And the police officer then says, as they give this guy a $110 piece of paper that he's going to have to pay, have a good day. That's police relations. Most of the contacts people have these days are not positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what did the DARE program do? The DARE program introduced these officers into elementary schools at the 4th grade level. Now, how many 4th graders did we have in those days? Maybe 3,000, right? So, and these kids loved the DARE officers. They just loved the DARE officers. And if the kids loved the DARE officers, the parents loved the DARE officers. If the kids and the parents loved the DARE officers, the police officers, and the grandparents, and then the neighbors. And so we got 3,000 kids affecting the opinion of 10,000 or 30,000 people. You see? So, a positive thing. Now, everybody you talk to will say, well, matter of fact, I still got a DARE certificate from graduating from the DARE program. And I've always thought that the police department ought to get back into that business to introduce police officers to kids on a positive note, just like you said. And I bet something like that happens. It doesn't have to be about drugs. It can be about civics. It can be about obeying the law. It can be about whatever you
know what I think it could be about, just important life lessons. You know, my daughter told me she was homeschooled through, I guess, 8th grade, and then we sent her to high school or middle school and then high school. And you know, she said she had a perception of what school would be like, and drugs particularly. She said, you know, she envisioned some guy in a trench coat going, "Psst, hey kid, come over here. You want to buy some drugs?" And she said, you know, it wasn't like that. She said, if you don't want to be involved in that, you just don't hang out with the wrong people. She goes, I've never been offered drugs. She said there were drugs in the school. You know, you could smell pot sometimes. You know, before and after school. You know, to different places that people outside of the school property, you know, would be smoking pot. She said, but no one's ever offered it to her. It's all in who you hang out with. And in that sense, that's the kind of lessons that our kids need to understand. You know, there's always going to be a certain element doing this stuff. You have to choose your friends wisely. But you're right. And police officers, it could be their role in the community to help out with that. But more than anything, it's you get back to the community relations, because it's hard. And you talk about Greg Howard. He was Captain Howard then, and I worked in a unit called Pattern Impact Unit, which we primarily worked in high crime areas. At that time, the projects. Okay. And we were squad officers that were unmarked cars, uniformed in unmarked cars. And I remember the speeches we would get at roll call. He would say, listen, he goes, out in this community, there are kids that want to play in the street. And I'm not kidding, by the way. This is pretty much what, there are kids that want to play in the street. There are kids that want to play in that park. Make it where they can. And that was the mentality. That's what I was taught as a police officer. You're not an occupying force there to harass people. You make the bad people, either put them in jail or you make them go somewhere else, because we want these kids that don't want to be involved in that to have a chance to live in this community and not have to be worried, okay? And so he would say, I want each of you on an 8-hour shift, I want to see 10 traffic stops and see what you get out of it. And his philosophy and just the whole philosophy of that unit was make as many contacts as you can with people over the course of that evening, and just check things out. If you see something to pull over, pull somebody over, and just talk to them, because you never know what you're going to stop or what kind of talent. You treat people right. You know, the officers in that unit were selected, and and we're told this is how you're going to treat people. You're going to treat people with respect. When you pull somebody over, you're not going to go, you know what you did. You're going to say, yes, sir, do you know why I stopped you? Just like that, and then you're going to tell them, I stopped you for failure to eliminate license plate. It's not a big deal. I just want to let you know that you might want to get a light put on that, because it's hard to see it at night. Could I see your driver's license? And then you talk to them, and if everything's cool, you let them go. But you made a contact. You just don't know what kind of crime you may have stopped. And the hope was that people in the community would appreciate it. But unfortunately, the way policing has changed and perceptions, and people now see that as some type of harassment. It's never what it was. Mm-hmm. If you were there for that specific reason. So it's a hard balance for police to figure that out. And then you get into the driving while black thing that became a controversy in the late 90s. And the reality of that is, if you're an officer, white or black, and you're working in a black neighborhood, and that happens to be a high crime black neighborhood, guess what? You're going to come in contact with black people, right?
Predominantly.
That's what you're going to do. So, that's where you're going to be, and so the numbers don't always tell the truth. So yeah, it looks like there's a disproportionate amount of people of color that are being stopped, but the reality of it is, you're there to get rid of the bad guys in the community, just like you would be in any community. And you're going to police the areas that have the most crime. It doesn't make any sense for you to be doing that in an area that's not having crime issues. That's goofy. That's a waste of your resources. So someone needs to stand up and say, look, this is why we do things, and this is the only way to stop it. Quit calling it racial profiling. It's profiling for crime, and that's what we're going to have to do. And you've got to let our officers do it, and you've got to back them up when things get
when they do it right, back them up.
Yep.
When they do it wrong, then they need to be called on it.
It depends, but good faith plays into that too.
Sure.
That's the thing too, because listen, the police are put in horrible situations, and if an officer can explain what he was doing, and it's all a good faith effort, and a reasonable person can see how things could have gone wrong, then you have to consider that too. But you know what? The police police the rogues. I promise you. Even when I was a cop, you didn't put up with someone in your squad that was mistreating people. You talked to the sergeant about it, and that person was gone within a few weeks. That's just how it worked. You're always going to have idiots and everything, but they are such the minority of the police officers that we deal with, and they will come out of the woodwork and be dealt with. I'm sorry, I'm going on a rant. We'll see you next week on In Touch.